Hi, I'm Debbie Avoux. Welcome back to my studio. If you follow along with me, I'm sorry it's been so long since my last tutorial. This summer's been crazy. I run summer art programs for kids and that took up my entire summer, in addition to my 2 kids being home and needing rides here and there and everywhere, back and forth between cross-country camps and gymnastics and guitar lessons, you name it. I have been a taxi service, as any parent can understand, I hope. But I'm back now. Kids are in school and it's gonna free up a little more time for me to work on some more tutorials. So I hope you will stick with me because I have a lot more coming. Today we're gonna be painting Hydrangea, so I hope you'll join me. Okay, to start off with this one, we're gonna sketch in the basic shapes. So we're gonna do a bigger hydrangea right about here. So just lightly sketch in a circle. And then we're gonna do a couple smaller ones. I'm making this one a little bit angled at an oval. And then another one, this one will overlap in front of that one. These will be smaller. You want the center piece to be this big one here. And then we'll do another one kind of down in the corner right there. And then let's not worry about the leaves yet. We'll add those in after. So I'm just going to be using 3 brushes today. The 5/8 angular brush, which we'll use for most of the big areas, and the number 8 filbert, and the number 2 round. So let's start off. We have our 3 primary colors, yellow, primary blue, magenta, and white. We're gonna start with a dark, dark green. So let's take a scoop of yellow, big scoop of blue, and we're gonna mix that up. And then we're gonna add some magenta to it, and the magenta is gonna help make it really dark. And I've explained before, you can actually get to black by mixing all 3 of these colors. It just takes the perfect mix of each of them. So that's what's going to help you get darker, because if we just were using blue and yellow to make green, we're not going to get the deep dark green. We'll get a really bluish green if we keep adding blue, but we're never going to get that deep dark color until we add the 3rd primary. So let's take a little bit of magenta and we'll mix that in and see where we get. And that's pretty dark, but it's not quite dark enough. You can do a little sample on your board. You can kind of see it's dark, but it's a little more of a bluish green. I'm going to add a little more yellow because I want to make it more of a deep, deep, dark green. So I'm going to add more yellow and a little more magenta. I want kind of like a deep army green almost. Because the flowers are in that purpley blue tone, we want to make the dark green a little bit on the opposite end of the color wheel, so more of an army green. So if we have blue and purple, we want to bring in some of the yellow, like a reddish yellow. It'll just make the blue stand out more. If the green isn't cool, since these are going to be a cool color, we want to make the background a warm color, and that's really going to make them stand out better. And just, it'll make the colors more vibrant. I took a little more magenta and and you want this really dark, almost black. It's gonna make it really pop later if you start off with a really dark. We'll take a little more yellow and a little more magenta, so it's gonna get a little more of the warm green, olive green shade. And we're just gonna paint around these rough shapes that we drew in. Again, you want that really dark. The darker the better. It's gonna make it stand out later. Okay, now let's take a scoop of yellow and we'll just mix it into a little bit of the edge of this dark green here. We want to get a little more vibrant with this. And not too much brighter. We want it to be just a couple shades brighter. And we're gonna add in some of the leaves. So let's just go over here and add in a leaf shape. And these leaves are a little bit wider, and then they have a little pointy tip to them, so they're real pointy at the tip, and then they get nice and fat and wide. If that's not showing up a little bit, take a little bit of white and mix it into that color. Let's put a little more yellow. We don't want it quite so light green. We're going to be doing lots of layers, so we're going to have quite a few stages of layering. So for now we're just putting the basic shapes in. And let's add another leaf coming down this way from this flower. Let's just kind of put that same shape. You're not going to see the whole thing. It's going to be a little bigger because this one's in the foreground. And let's do another one over here in the corner. And there's a few, it's okay if there's a few different shades of green on your leaf. That gives it even more interest. And let's do another one coming in between here. And how about another one over here? Okay, so we got the basic shapes laid out here. It's probably blending in with your dark green, that's okay. As long as you can see it a little bit. And that one go off the edge a little more, make that a little more interesting of a shape. Whenever you're designing something, I was looking at a bunch of different pictures of hydrangea, and I found one that was pretty good. I just zoomed in. I knew I wanted a square format, so I just zoomed in on it. You always want to have a main focal point and then offset. You wouldn't want to have like three perfectly shaped in the center. Like this one's a little bit off center, it's bigger. This is just a little hint of a corner, and these are going to be a little further back. So we want our main detail to be on this main one, so you have that focal point right front and center. And so that's how we got this layout. Okay, let's add some more detail to our leaves here. While we have some of this color still, we can do a few little smudges in the background just to give a hint that maybe there's some leaves blurred out in the background there. So I'm just going to do a few little smudges, and if they blend into your dark green a little bit, that's okay. You don't want it to be real clear, so I wouldn't draw like a leaf shape, just kind of like a little smudge, and it helps to have it just barely a little bit lighter than your background, so it'll give it more of that blurred effect if you're not real clear on the details. So it just kind of looks like there's a hint of a leaf back there without getting really, really detailed. So maybe a couple smudges back there, like that. Okay. A little more of that dark green in there. A little more light green. But you want to keep that dark, pretty dark, because you want that to look like it's deep in the depths of the bush. Okay, so let's take a little more yellow. We're going to get a little lighter green, teeny bit of white. And I'm just kind of mixing it into that pile we had. A little more yellow. And we're going to add a little bit of detail. Let's just use the very tippy, pointy part of that brush. Can you see that? That little pointy part. Let's use the tip of that, and we're going to just draw a little line right down the middle. Skinny little line right down the middle. And then we're going to start on the edge, and we're just going to create some veining. We're going to keep this one kind of abstract, so it's not going to be like a tight, realistic detail. So we're just kind of giving the hint by pushing, using the edge and pushing towards the center, it's going to create these streaks because the veins of the leaf kind of go at an angle in this direction and then an angle this direction. We'll do a few swipes with the flat part of the brush, and then we'll get a little more detailed and do some little skinny lines using just the tip of the brush and create a few little fine veins in the leaf coming from the edge. And if it's not showing up enough, you might need a little bit more white in your paint, just a teeny bit. We don't want this to be real bright yet. We're keeping it very muted and subtle, and we'll go back in later and add lighter and lighter and lighter details to make it really stand out and come forward. Let's do the same thing on this leaf down here. We're going to draw a little line down the center, and then remember the direction of the veining, so it's kind of going from the pointy part angling towards the center. So since this is upside down, we're going to do it the opposite way. Do some flat swipes with the fat side of our brush first, and then we'll do some little skinny lines. And a tiny more white on mine. Some skinny little lines, keeping it subtle, don't get too light. And we'll do the same thing on this one, little line down the center. Do a few streaks going this way. Again, if the pointy part of the tippy part of the leaf is right here, it's angling down and towards this center line. And you don't want these lines to be too perfectly spaced apart for right now. We're just kind of giving the impression that there's some veining going on the leaf. A line down the middle of this one. Now this leaf, if you could see through this flower, it'd be coming to a point like this. So the angles are going to go this direction. And one last one here. Draw a line down the center. And we'll do some angled lines. If your paint is dry, you might need to wet your brush a little bit. Mine's getting a little dry right there. Okay, that's good for now. Then let's take a little more yellow and a little bit of white. So we're going to get a little bit lighter now. Now we want to do a little bit more bright detail. So let's take just the tip of the brush. And I'm not doing a solid line. I'm just using the very, very tip of the brush. So some of it might be hitting the canvas, some of it's kind of skipping. You don't want like a too perfect of a line. And I'm going to add a little more detail along the edge. I'm using the pointy part of the brush just along the edge of the leaf. I'm brightening up the edge just a touch. And I'm just kind of hitting it here and there. And then I'm going to do a little more of this veining using the tip of the brush. And you know what, let's switch brushes. Let's switch to clean off that brush. I'm going to switch to my number, can you see that? Number 8 filbert. Wait a minute, can you see that? And number 8 filbert, taking a little bit of that light color, and from the edge going in towards the center line there, just adding some streaks. And I'm just doing one side of the leaf. I want it to be a little bit brighter on one side, as if the sun is hitting just one side of it. So I'm just doing a few streaks, keeping it kind of loose. On this one, let's do a few streaks just on this upper side. A little more of that. Let's do the right side on this one. And down here, let's do this side. And a little more of this. Let's do this side. A little more on this side. And let's add a little more yellow. Teeny bit more white. And I'll add a few more streaks on the lighter sides of some of these. You don't want to be too consistent. Keep it a little random. You don't want to do like stripe, 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 perfect. You can just hit like a few areas. Just a couple spots. If it's looking a little too perfect, you can always go back in later with some of the darker green. That's why it's important to know how to mix your colors really well, because you're going to have to go back in and mix a lot of these colors again. You want to remember how you got there. You want to just be able to look at a color and know how much yellow's in it, how much white's in it. So keep saying I'm going to make a color mixing video, a level 2 color mixing video. I have one on my channel, but it's more of the basics of mixing just the primaries, but I'm going to be doing a second one that gets more in depth of how to mix every color you can imagine. And I'm going to get that done. I'm just not sure when. As soon as I do, I will put a link on the top of this video, at the bottom of the page as well, and that'll be really helpful. Okay, so let's take a little more white, get a little bit lighter. You want this to be very gradual, so there's lots of layers of colors. Let's do just a couple swipes with the lighter color. This is pretty bright, so you don't want to do it a lot of this. We're getting pretty bright, so you kind of want just a couple little spots to look as if the sun's hitting them. I don't like how this one's looking. I'm gonna add a few more streaks just to kind of blend that out a little. And then let's brighten up the edges a little bit. I'm gonna take my, clean off that brush. I'm gonna take my little tiny number 2 round brush and get my brush a little bit wet, adding a little more white to that mix to get it nice and light. And I'm just going to tap on some of these little edges here. And they don't have to be, they can be a little bumpy. These leaves have little jagged edges to them, so just tapping on some of these little edges. Kind of using a unsteady hand technique. So if you've got shaky hands, this is perfect. Just kind of shake your hand a little bit. And let's do a little bit of that deeper color green and do it on the other side too. So it's still lighter, but not quite as bright. Do it on all the other sides. And you can also go right down the middle with this brighter color. And again, just kind of tapping here and there. Don't make it a real solid line. You want it to look like just lights, the light's hitting it just in a few different places. And we can do a few little swipes of this, with some of this veining, some of these little skinny lines. Get my brush wet. And then I find what helps to get this brush nice and pointy, if you twist it in your fingers like this, twist it and drag it, and twist it and drag it, that'll help get it nice and pointy. It spins all the bristles into a nice sharp point. And then just using barely touching the canvas with the tip of the brush, that helps get little tiny lines. And I'm just adding these brighter lines from the center line to the edge. I'm not being totally consistent, so so they're not like big bright stripes. You don't want that. Just little bits here and there. Okay, I feel like some of these, now you can see how much brighter just the right sides of these are getting, or the one sides that we're doing. Now the other side needs just a little bit more, so let's take some of the darker shade of green, like the in-between medium kind of shade, so it's just about not quite as dark as that original leaf color, but a little bit brighter. And I'm just gonna faintly, if you water down your brush a little, this will help too. Just doing a couple, that got really bright, so I'm gonna go a little darker, that medium color. And I'm just doing a few swipes on those dark sides. If it's too bright, just darken it up a little bit with a little bit of your darker green. Well, that's too bright looking. Maybe more of an olive color. If it's looking too bright green, just take a little bit of yellow and a little bit of magenta, and that will really mute it down and make it more of an olive shade. Yeah, that's better. You know, these plants, you don't want bright green. You want to keep those greens a little more warmer, a little bit more on the warm side. I'm just adding a few swipes because mine was so dark you couldn't really see any detail on the left side of those leaves. I'm just adding a few those veining streaks here and there. Okay, this one got a little too mushy, too mashed up, so I'm going to add a little bit of the darker army green color, like that original shade we did. I'm just going to break it up a little bit in between all these bright streaks. That's the great thing about acrylics, you can just go, once it dries, you go right back in, tap on some areas that you didn't like particularly, and we can go in on the end too, at the end too, so don't worry if you don't love what it's looking like right now, don't stress over it, because the leaves are sort of the background thing that isn't the main focal point, so you're not even going to notice these as much. You just want these to kind of disappear almost. Okay, so we can go back into that later. It's looking too perfect and stripy. We'll fix that later. Just going to add a little more of that brighter detail on the edge and right down the middle. My shaky hand. Okay, so let's clean off that brush. Yeah, I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to add a tall stem coming through here. So let's take some of that green color that's not the brightest green, kind of an in-between green. And use your little tiny brush. And we're just going to do a skinny little line curving from like right up the upper left side, coming down behind this leaf and peeking out behind here. Just make it looks like, just make sure it looks like it continues in the connected line. So I'll usually like draw a line, barely lift up my brush, keep going, keep going, keep going, and then continue when that leaf continues. And then we're going to add a few little skinny little branch-like things coming off of it. And they're kind of coming up from the top and curving upwards. They're growing kind of up and over. Let's just add a few of those little skinny lines. using just the tip of the brush and scatter them a little bit, you know, like offset them a little bit. Let's do another one over here and one more here, and then I'm going to do a leaf shape. So this is going to be like the bottom edge of the leaf, and then it's going to curve up. So we're seeing like the side part of the leaf. Let's do this kind of a shape. And I'll put a picture up of the sample leaf I'm looking at in my photo sample. I have it kind of curve up and then come and curve around back to a point. And let's do a little leaf shape here. Getting wider on the edge and then tapering in a little bit like that. I'll wrap that around the edge of my canvas there. And let's do another little swoop. So if there's a leaf kind of coming off the top there. Wrap that around the side of my canvas. And then we're going to take a little bit of white, a little bit of yellow, do a little lighter green mix in there, and I'm going to create the side of this leaf. We're going to just go a little brighter, and I'm not going all the way up to the edge. And just, this is going to be the top edge of the leaf. So we're seeing like the leaf is folded over, so we're seeing this side of it. So we're going to add a little bit of that lighter color along this side. And then let's draw a little line down the middle of this one. And let's do a little edge, the same bright color. Just a little edge on this one, just to give it a little more interest. And we can even do some little veining, little subtle streaks on the edge of that. And then do a little more of that white and yellow mix. And I'm going to do a little highlight right down the center of this stem here. It's going to give it a little more dimension and shape. It looks like it's got a highlight hitting it. You can do a couple highlights on, and again, just kind of tapping and lifting and tapping and lifting, just so it's not a completely perfect outline. So like the sun's hitting a few little parts of it. Let's get a little brighter right on this edge here. Swipe of brightness there. A little dark green, do a couple swipes on there. Okay, that's good for now. Clean off the brush. Now we're going to get into some of the flowers. We're going to take our 5/8 angular brush again, and we're going to mix a deep, dark purple shade. So we're going to take a scoop of blue and a scoop of magenta, so more blue than magenta to start with. We're going to get a deep, let's do a little more magenta. Let's see how that looks. That's pretty. Okay, so we're going to fill in the whole circle. We'll start with the big one. It's okay if it's not perfectly solid to start with. Then on the edges, we're going to smudge our brush, the flat side of the brush. So we want to get the edges not so perfect. So I'm kind of, make sure you cover up all the white areas. So I would suggest getting all the white covered first, so you don't have any white spots showing later. And then you're just gonna put a little extra paint on your brush, and we want the edges to be kind of bumpy. Almost like you're smudging it to make the shape of a petal. So kind of like this. Let's see, do an example. Like if you're smudging the brush down like that shape. That kind of a shape. Doing it all along the edges of that circle. But you don't want it to be too perfectly consistent. So some could have kind of a pointier edge to it. So it looks like the petal's turning. Some will be a little more square looking. You don't want it to be too crazy, too wild. So you still want that overall round shape, but you want the edges to be a little more random looking. I need to mix more of this color, so take another scoop of blue, scoop of magenta, more blue. Okay, let's color this one. We're gonna do 2 of them, maybe a little more bluish, and then 2 of them a little more of a purpley shade to them. We'll start off blue. We're going to be mixing lots of different shades, so don't worry if it looks too blue right now. So see, I'm just kind of making the edges a little bit more of a bumpy, not so perfectly round shape. And then we're going to make this one a little more purple, so I'm going to put more magenta in there and get more of a purple shade in that one. Need more magenta. Okay, more magenta. Same thing on those edges. Just make sure these don't get too big because you don't want them to end up being the same size as this main one here. Let's do this one more of that purpley shade too. Okay, so it wasn't the camera's fault. It was my fault. I just didn't look to see if that little red dot was blinking when I hit the record button. Apparently it wasn't, so we missed an entire section. So what I'm gonna do is create a new painting. I'm not gonna redo the whole painting, so I'm just gonna use a blank canvas. I'm gonna do the 3 or the 4 hydrangeas, the different sections, and catch you up from where it cut off at this point here to this point here. So I apologize. I'm horribly technically challenged. Anybody that knows me knows that. If you've watched my other videos, you've probably seen a little bit of it. So I'm sorry. Okay, so we're pretty much caught up, I think, where we left off. Yours should look somewhat like this. You're gonna have the 2 more bluish purple flowers here, and then these are a little bit more of the magenta purple right there. So what works best is if your paint is still pretty wet. If you can work kind of fast, that works great, because the more layers and layers we get on, the more it's just gonna bring out lots of different colors, and it's just gonna look really nice and work well. So let's start with the flowers back here, since these are in the we're gonna take a little bit of that mixture. You should still have some of that, more of the magenta purple mixture. And let's take a little bit of white, and we're using our 5/8 angular brush still. We're gonna use this one for pretty much all of these petals. So you're just gonna take a little bit of white and keep your darker side there so you can kind of see the difference between the 2 colors. So we just wanna get a little bit lighter. We're gonna gradually build up to lighter and lighter and lighter. This is probably gonna be way too light, but let's just start. Yeah, let's go a little bit darker. You know, we're gonna need to mix more of this because I'm taking all of it. And again, you're gonna turn your brush different ways so you don't get the same exact pattern throughout the whole thing. So you're gonna smudge it. Sometimes you turn your brush that way, sometimes you'll smash your brush, the tip of it. You're gonna do different sizes and shapes. So we get different shaped petals. Now what you're gonna do is picture this being like a row of petals, the outer layer, and then an inner layer, inner layer, inner layer, inner layer. So it's kind of like, you don't want it to look like a complete pattern, but that's kind of the way these petals bloom. So let's start kind of on the outside edges, and we're just gonna add a layer of these petals. And again, I'm turning my brush. Sometimes I'm using the flat pointy part and flattening it like that. Sometimes I'm holding the whole side of it. So we're gonna do a variation of shapes. You don't want to cover up all of the dark purple. You want to still see some of that dark purple showing through, but see how I'm kind of like working on this outer edges and then kind of coming in. So you're gonna end up with the center like that. Then we're gonna go a little bit lighter, take a little more white, just a little bit lighter. Oops. And then we're gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna just randomly work our way towards the center. And go a little bit lighter. Just a little bit. You want to make this gradual so it's not too bright all of a sudden. And then I'm going to do some of these smaller petals where I'm taking the tip of the brush and flattening it down like that. I'm just going to add some little smaller ones. Now what we want to do is keep in mind where your light source is. So if the light is like up on this upper right side and shining down, we're going to get lighter on this edge. So let's keep this darker. Let's not add any more light to that side. Let's go a little bit lighter. We're just going to add some little petals just along the right side. Go a little lighter. And then we want to give it a little more interest in color. So let's take a little bit of this more bluish purple color. Add just a little bit of that into it. So we have a couple of those, like kind of periwinkle shades. We could add a couple over on that side too. Just kind of intermix those in there. And you want some lighter ones on this edge. Keep these darker ones over on that edge. We're going to do the same concept for all the flowers, obviously, so just keep in mind. Let's go a little bit lighter right along these outside edges. And don't go too crazy, just the lighter and lighter as each step goes. You want to do less and less. So, you know, the first step was overall dark, and then we had quite a few of the next shade up. When we added more white, we did a little fewer, added more white, did even fewer. So now we're going to just do even fewer, keeping it more on the right side there. Let's go ahead and do this one too. We should have done that one at the same time. Let's mix some more of this purple shade. Add just a little bit of white to it. Let's get that more magenta. So we want these to have more of a blue feel, and these to have a little more of a purple. That's still a little too bluish. If you want to get even more purple, you can. That would be pretty. Oh, that's pretty. Again, starting on the outer edges and kind of working our way in towards the center. So lift this up a little. See how it's not way lighter than that dark shade? Now we're just going to go a little bit lighter. Add just a little bit of white. And you're kind of overlapping on some. You want to still see little bits of that dark showing through. So don't cover up all of the dark. Let's go a little bit lighter. Use the tip of the brush maybe just to do some smaller little petals. And I don't mix, you'll notice I don't completely mix that color solid. It's nice when you have a few shades of paint on your brush for these petals, because you want to see, like when you do that little smudge, you can see there's little bits of white and some purple and some lighter purple. Let's get a little more of that bluish shade in there. Just add a few of those little dabs here and there so we get more variation of color. And make this, you don't want this to look like a perfect circle. So let's bump up that edge. I'm putting a little more white on my brush. Let's do a few little stragglers kind of popping out. so it's not so perfect. A little bump here, a little bump there. Now on my original painting, I ended up getting these a little too big and we lost that little leaf that was in there. But later on in the video, you'll see I'm going to add a leaf in there. So don't worry if they get a little too crowded. But you definitely want to make sure this one stays in front. So don't have these petals come up. The ones from these flowers, don't have these come up on top of this one, because this one's going to be in front. So let's do this one now. We'll just take our brush. You don't even have to clean it off. Just mix a little bit into that bluish purple. And let's add some petals all around these edges. See, I'm keeping those dark ones there because you want to have those dark ones still showing. I just added a little bit of water to my brush because my paint, this one's pretty dry now, so it's not going to blend as nicely on top of the paint. So adding a little bit of water. So you can kind of see the pattern. Outer ring, inner, inner, inner. Let's do this one too. So I'm using the wide part of the brush to get some wide flat leaves so we have some variation of flower petals. Now this flower is on top of this one, so that's why we did this one first, so this one can overlap on top of it. Now let's add a little bit of white. I'm wiping off the extra paint on my brush. Stir that in. See, I've got a little bit of that color mixed in there, but that'll be pretty. So that's okay. And I'm going to use the pointy part of my brush to get some smaller little petal shapes. See how they're all kind of pointing in towards the center. And just flipping your brush around different directions. Let's do some on this one. Get my brush a little wet because that paint is still kind of dry. Put a little more white in there. It's kind of blending in a little too much with that other color. And notice how I'm kind of filling in the space. So I did that first layer and now I'm going kind of in between. So I'm not going completely on top of the previous color. I'm sort of kind of like laying bricks. You know, you have like one row and then the next row will be the opposite section. But you want it to look a little random. You don't want it to look like a perfect laid out pattern. I'm going to take a little more white. And then I'm going to do another layer of this. And I'm going to keep this darker. I'm going to avoid this section and just get brighter and lighter on this part where the light is hitting. And I'm going to kind of go in towards the center, right side. Smash your brush down to get some different shapes of petals, but always sort of angling and pointing in towards the center. A little more white in there. So I'm kind of doing the first layers more with the wide part of the brush, and then as I'm getting the final layers, I'm using that pointy part and making little smaller petals. So there's just like little bits kind of popping in there. Okay, we need a little more color variation in here, so let's take a little bit of that more magenta purple and throw a few of those in there. Put a little more white in there. It's looking a little too patterned. I want it to look a little more full and have some more variation of color in there. But overall, you do want to keep this one more bluish, so it looks like that different blue colored flower. That's okay to have just a few hints of that more purpley shade in there. Let's add a little more white. And let's do some little bits of white. And again, it's not going to really come out pure white because it's blending and mixing in with the wet paint. I just want some little bits Do a few little bits of white in here too, just a few. Okay, I think we need more layers in here, so I'm going to mix some more of that darker color. Let's take some blue and some magenta. You might already have some on your palette that's wet, but I feel like I just need a few more layers. And we can go back and forth on top if you cover up a lot of your other shades, but I'm just going to do more layers because it was so dry, it just wasn't blending as nice. Do some more in here too. And again, making sure your edges are nice and bumpy, not perfectly round and smooth. And we could throw a few little light ones in there, just here and there, so it looks like the light might have gotten in there and is tapping on a few of those petals. Let's take a little more of that purpley color. Just a few of those mixed in there. Again, not too many because you want this to overall have that more bluish tone to it. Okay, I think you should be caught up to where I screwed up and forgot to record. So let's see, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I missed. I think where it catches up, it's going to add a little bit more white highlights to there. So hopefully that looks pretty good. I was trying to sort of match what I had going on in my final one. Yeah, I think that'll work. All right, sorry about that. I suck. Okay, let's do a few more. And this is just really your personal preference. When you're at a stage where you like it and you think it looks nice and full and fluffy and all the colors are working for you, that's when you'll stop. Because yours and mine do not look exactly alike right now, I'm sure. Because every brush stroke is going to be different. And this one's just kind of a little more free-flowing, and it's okay if it looks totally different. Okay, let's add a little more white, and I'm just going to add a few touches of really bright, bright white. Barely any of these. This is just sort of where the light is hitting the flowers a little bit here and there. So you'll have a few little bright white, like almost completely bright white. Now I want to add that leaf back in. So I need to make some more of a green shade, so I'm going to take some blue and a scoop of yellow. And let's take a little magenta. So we tone it down a little bit, make it more of an olive green. And let's do more yellow, big scoop of yellow. So we want to mix a color that's like the leaf color. So remember, it was kind of a medium green shade. So let's do a little leaf kind of cutting across here. And we'll paint around the petals there. I'm just going to sneak a little leaf in there. So if you have a situation like this in your painting where you want to add a little bit of a leaf back in, you can do that as well. This will also, by adding this leaf in front of this one, it sets that back a little bit and it just makes it a little bit more interesting too. So I'll probably go in and add some more of these petals on top of the leaf after I add it in there, but we'll see. Okay, so we'll just peek that in there, and then take our little tiny 2-inch round brush, a little bit of white, a little bit of yellow, to make a lighter green shade there. And let's draw a little line right down the middle. So this leaf is coming off of this one, so the point is going to be here. So if the point's there, remember these lines start at the point, kind of, the points here, they're going to direct. Does that make sense? Like these lines are coming in towards. So if the point's here, then the lines are coming in this way. So let's just go ahead and add some little streaks. That's pretty bright, but it's okay. We can fade it back a little bit. Just drag your brush back and forth so it blends into that deeper green a little. And then we can add a little hint of some veins on that side. Keep it more subtle so it's a little brighter on that side. And let's take a little more white and let's just tap, kind of that shaky hand idea, where you're just kind of tapping and wiggling a little bit on the edge of the leaf. Now we can go back in if there's any leaves that we want to stand out a little bit more. We can add a little vibrancy to some of these areas. Pump up the colors a little more. Maybe this one over here. So when acrylic paint dries, especially if you have a lot of water in it when you're painting, it does dry a little bit darker. So once it's all dry, you can stand back and look and see where you need to add a little brightness. But again, we kind of want the leaves to be secondary. We want the focal point to be the flowers. So you don't want to make these have too much contrast and stand out too much. I'm going to add just a little bit more onto this edge here. Just using the very tip of my brush, just doing a really fine little edge. And then maybe just tap a few spots. Okay, so stand back and take a look. See where you think any details need to be added. I think I'm going to get a little bit darker around some of these flowers with that dark green. So let's just take a little more magenta into some of that dark green that you started there. And a little more blue. We're going to get dark. I'm just adding a little more blue, a little more magenta. Add little bits at a time, and you can build it up. Do a little more blue. And some more yellow. I still want to look green. I don't want to look blue. Mix that all up and see what you get. Got a little more magenta and a little more blue. Get even darker. Yeah. And I'm just going to carefully paint around these little petals, and I'm just going to add a little bit of this darker color in the background. And it doesn't have to be solid. I'm adding it mostly right around the edges of some of the lighter petals. It's really going to push them forward and make them pop. Like right here, this can be much darker. This little section, it's a small little area, but it's really already, it makes that leaf just really pop forward. Let's do the same thing down here. And a lot of times it's just adding a second coat will just darken it up. Because once your acrylic dries, sometimes it can look lighter. If you only have one layer of paint on your canvas, the white of the canvas can kind of show through. So sometimes you need to do a second layer. Add a little more right around in there. And again, it doesn't have to be solid. It looks even better if it's sort of patchy. Makes it look more like there's other stuff going on in the background. I'm gonna go right along the edges of the leaves too, to make them stand out. And if you need to use a smaller brush, you don't have to use this big one. But I like this big one because that pointy part can actually get you into little tiny areas. And I'm just using the very tip of it. And then I'm going to take my number 8 filbert and I'm just going to smudge it around a little. So it's not just so solid. Gives it a little more variation in color. And my son is texting me, hold on. Okay. Add a little darker right under this leaf, and that's really going to make that stand out too. And right above it. Oh shoot. My son's out of school early. Excuse me, my son's calling. Hi! Shoot, I'm right in the middle of filming, but I'll come get you. Okay, I'll leave here in 5 minutes. Or as soon as I get my shoes on and take a poet downstairs. Okay? Okay, love you. Okay, bye. Okay, I'm back from picking my son up from school. So I'm right now like looking over this. These leaves are standing out a little bit too much for me. I want to tone, especially this one. It got to be so much contrast. So I'm going to add a little bit more of the medium green shade that we started with. And I'm watering down my brush. So it's like a thin kind of transparent layer of green. I'm just toning that back a little bit so it's not so stripy and standing out so much. I'm just doing a little swipe right over that to tone it down a little. And then I'm going to add some little smudges. Take a little more of that dark green. Just some little smudges here and there. So it kind of looks like there's more going on in the background. And it's not just so solid dark. Real subtle. And I'm watering it down a little bit so it's not like it's not a big vibrant swatch of paint. Just doing some little smudges here and there. I'll take a little more of that dark green and just kind of blend it out a little. Just kind of creating a little interest back there so it looks like there's a lot more going on that we just can't see. And if it gets too bright, you want to keep this really subtle. So you can go back and forth with some of the darker, lighter, just indiscreet little shapes and smudges here and there. Keeping it dark overall, but just gonna make it a little more interest back there. Could even go add a little stem here and there. Keeping it really subtle. Don't get real bright. Don't get as bright as this one. Just want to make it look like there's a little more going on in the background, but keeping it in the distance so it's not jumping out at you, but I don't know, I just felt like I needed a little more something going on there. Okay, and then let's add a few more of these flower petals above the leaf that we added. Hopefully I still have some wet paint here. A little bit there. So I'm going to add a darker some of those darker petals first. I don't want to cover up the whole leaf, but I just want to have a couple of these little petals overlapping that leaf. Now I need to do some lighter ones. Make that blend in a little better. Now you can just go in and add and tweak where you feel like it needs a little something. I feel like I just wanted, this was too round and almost perfect looking. I want to have a few of these flowers sort of popping out the petals. It's not such a perfect edge. Let's brighten up some of these spots here. And now my paint is dry, so that's really standing out. So I'm gonna wet my, get some of that, wet my brush down a little. And notice how I'm just kind of picking up little bits here and there to kind of have a whole mix of the colors on my brush, so it's not just one solid color. And I'm just tapping in a few little areas here and there. I'm keeping most of this dark, but every here and there, a little bit, I'll add just one lighter one here and there. But overall, I want to keep most of that really dark. And sometimes the light might just hit a certain petal, and it might stand out a little. Okay, and then every once in a while, just stand back, take a look. I like how there's just a couple little bright spots on that flower, so I'm just going to add a couple more little bright spots on this one. That one. And again, there's no right or wrong with this, just kind of where you feel like it needs it. Alright, I think I'm just going to brighten up. I'm going to take a little more yellow with my 5/8 angular brush. And a little bit of white. Oh, gotta go pick up my daughter in 5 minutes. Okay, I think we're almost there. So I'm gonna... No, I don't like that. That's okay though. I put a little too much, so I'm just cleaning off my brush. And drying off most of the water. I want a little more yellow. And it's very watered down. And I'm just brightening up this side. I'm gonna do the same thing over here. I'm just gonna do some streaks. Veining, and let's do this side too. Maybe just a few subtle light veins on that side, just a couple on that side. I feel like I did a little too much here, so I'm just cleaning off my brush, and with a damp brush I'm wiping off most of the water. And I'm just wiping away a little bit of the paint that I added there. Kind of working in reverse, just erasing little bits here and there. Wipe that off the petal. And then we'll go in with a little more of that bright white-yellow mix. Just touch on some of those edges. Right down the middle. I add a few more veins. You can use your tiny brush, or you can use the very tip of your 5/8 angular brush. Just a few little spots here and there, just to brighten up and highlight a couple areas. And again, these are all just personal preference. If you feel like it needs to be brightened up a little bit here and there, this is what can take a while, just doing all the final tweaks. And it's up to you to decide when your painting is done. Because sometimes you can just go for hours and hours and hours adding more and more and more details. You don't always need it. You gotta know when to stop. Just adding a little subtle highlight on those little back branches that I added. Now, one thing that's bugging me is that the point of this leaf, the little tippy part, is like the very, very point is cut off. So I feel like either I need to put this point of the leaf in front of this flower or make the leaf wider so there's more of it covered. Like right now there's like just such a tiny amount covered. It either needs to be a lot more or a lot less. So I'm going to make this leaf be on top of that one. So I'm going to make this leaf a little bit longer, the tip of it, and have it overlap those flower petals a little bit. It's just going to make it look better in my eyes, and from a design point of view it just makes more sense to have it overlapping more than it was. Whether it be in the leaf that's overlapping or the flower. So I'm just going to go with the leaf. So again, this is why it's important to know how to mix your colors. So if you do need to do this, you can make those same green shades that you had before. Okay, and then a lot of times when I'm not quite sure if I'm done, I think I'm done, I will take my phone and take a picture of the painting. And then when you look at it in a photo, you can notice things that you don't see when you're standing right in front of it. So let's check this out. I definitely like that we made the background darker, and that putting that leaf in front for sure. That was a good decision. I think we're done. Yeah, pretty happy with that. Okay, so your last step: sign your painting and. Hi. Should I pick you up?
Hi.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me today. Thanks for hanging in there through the little bumps in the road. And I hope you'll come back for the next one.